We all know about the events that happened at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, but not all of us know what was going on behind the scenes. During World War II, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in an attempt to have total control over the Pacific theater. When this happened, the U.S. went into a panic. This caused many Japanese Americans to be looked down upon and discriminated against, much like what people who are Muslim are experiencing today. President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066 authorizing exclusion. Congress then implemented the order on March 21, 1942 by passing Public Law 503 to provide penalty for violation of restrictions or orders with respect to persons entering, remaining in, leaving, or committing any act in military areas or zones. For these people, this meant that they would be removed from their homes and put into the internment camps. The government stripped them of their rights and forced them from their homes, farms, schools. Many Americans generally supported it because they shared the same fears as Franklin D. Roosevelt. Japanese Americans felt that the internment camps were oppressive and their rights were being taken away from them. Many Americans knew this order was unconstitutional, specifically Ralph Carr.
It was desolate. When we arrived, we saw rows and rows of black tar paper barracks, surrounded by barbed wire, soldiers with guns. The day we arrived, it was 126 degrees. Our room was small. The cots were lined up side by side. There was only one bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Latrines, showers, and laundry rooms were in distant buildings. There was no privacy. In fourth grade social studies, we read about the war with Japan. I remember crying because I felt I was the enemy. I felt guilty, ashamed, and inferior.
On December 17, 1944, President Roosevelt announced the end of the exclusion of Japanese Americans from the West Coast and allowed them to return home. Relocation after incarceration was difficult, especially since prejudice still ran high in the West Coast.
My little sisters and I took public transit to Saturday Japanese language school. One day, a woman got on the bus, and when she saw us, she started yelling, "Get these Japs off the bus. They don't belong here." We were frightened and started crying.
Many first-generation Japanese Americans never regained their losses, living out their lives in poverty and poor health. It wasn't until August in 1988 a federal commission's findings convinced Congress that the internment camps were wrong, and the United States government should accept responsibility. The government apologized and passed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 that acknowledged that a grave injustice was done. The government also promised to repay Japanese Americans for the losses they suffered. Today, the Japanese American community is still working to make sure that all of those who were forced to leave their homes are compensated. But in general, it doesn't play out much today for others. When we talk about Pearl Harbor, we gloss over the internment camps. A good example of this is our textbooks. It talks about Pearl Harbor, but says nothing about the camps. Many people don't even know about this because it was never really talked about in schools or even outside of school.